Hi everyone, I hope I'm audible and visible to all of you. If you can see and hear me clearly, can you just give me a yes in the comments and then I'll start off? Hi everyone, hi Keshav, Mihir, and the others. What we're going to talk about today is the tokenization of luxury assets. So, if you're part of the tokenization WhatsApp group, then just today I shared a report which was created by Knight Frank, which is on investments in luxury assets and luxury investments. So, that's what kind of we're going to talk about today, that how these can be brought onto the blockchain and what are the benefits as well as the challenges of such an approach. Now, in case you're not part of the WhatsApp group, I've just put the URL in the chat. So you can just join that group. So you'll always be part of the discussions and quizzes that we regularly hold. Now, when we talk about luxury assets, usually the kind of things that we are referring to firstly is art. Now, we're not talking about digital art, which becomes those typical NFTs. No, we're talking about physical art, which is obviously stored with a custodian or with a museum. So, we talk about art, we talk about cars. Obviously, the cars that we are talking about here are not the normal ones that we see on the roads, these are collectible cars. So, over a period of time, the value really goes up because they are limited editions or they have a lot of antique value to it. Another thing we talk about are private jets. Then we have rare coins, notes, and stamps, sneakers, watches, and whiskey. So, what I'm going to do is I'm just putting these seven names in the chat. Okay, unfortunately, it's all getting jumbled up together, but okay, I've just put the names for your reference. So, let's start with the first one. So, art is something that we discussed, I think, previously also in another session. A lot of people like to collect art. Now, many people want to see that art on their walls, but sometimes when it's a very expensive piece of art, it may not be practical for someone to hold it individually. And that's where a museum or a custodian would come in and they would hold the art, they would display it to the world, and then people around the world can be part owners. So, a classic example would be the Mona Lisa. So if you look at the insured value, it's about $1 billion. So the Louvre Museum, which holds the Mona Lisa, could distribute these 1 billion tokens for $1 each. And then over the years, as the painting becomes more and more valuable, the value of your token could go up. So that's a very simple example of tokenization of art. Now, it need not always be such super famous art. It could also be budding artists who are just starting off. But in that case, again, we will need some kind of a custodian to hold the art. If you guys have any questions, just keep putting it on the side. And I hope you're able to see and hear me clearly. The second thing that we talk about are cars. Now, here, custody is a big issue because the car itself is large and it's heavy. So, obviously, you need a lot of space. And then you need the insurance, you need the security of the car, and then somebody needs to, from time to time, service the engines, keep the polish and everything else properly maintained. So, maintaining a car is expensive. So when we look at art, it isn't that difficult to maintain it. But when it comes to cars, there's a huge cost of maintenance which comes in. So that cost will ultimately, logically, have to be borne by the investors. Or if we look at it in this way, that there is a revenue being generated by the cars because let's say people come to the museum to look at the cars regularly. Now the fees that they pay, that is definitely a revenue stream. From that we could deduct the cost of maintenance, and then whatever is left could also go as some kind of a dividend to the token holders. Are there any questions so far? Can you guys give me a quick yes if I am audible and visible to all of you? Because I don't see any response. So I was just wondering whether you were able to hear me. Can you give me a quick yes? Because I do seem to be having some internet problems. Okay. So now that we've understood about cars, then the Awesome. The next thing that we talk about are private jets. Now, why specifically private jets is because when we talk about large aircraft, then obviously there's an airline that has to really manage it, and there's huge costs which are involved in it. But when we talk about private jets, these are smaller, obviously, and they have some very interesting use cases. So sometimes they're used for medical evacuations, although that's something a helicopter would probably do better. But they're also being leased around the world a lot nowadays. So ever since COVID, it is noticed that the private jet revenues have really gone up because a lot of people who can now afford it don't want to go commercial and they want to travel in private jets. Now, one thing we must always remember, private jets are very highly regulated. And whichever country you are traveling to, there are lots of legal compliances that need to be done. So private jets again come in with their huge cost, but the benefit is the revenue streams are very strong. So when we do tokenize a private jet, we are able to tokenize all these revenue streams also. We finished a document called Tokenization of Aviation Assets, and you can have a look at that. And a very detailed step by step process is also mentioned in how you actually tokenize these private jets. Then we have rare coins, notes, and stamps. So I don't know whether you've collected them, but as a kid, I used to collect stamps, and now I still collect some kinds of currency notes. Now, while they are very popular as a hobby, some of them are really highly valued. So I'm aware of certain currency notes that may be actually worth over $1 million today in terms of the valuation. Same is the case with some of the stamps and coins. Now, because of their size, it's usually easier to take care of the coins because they are again metallic, so they're quite sturdy. Whereas on the other hand, notes and stamps being made out of paper, there's always more chances of them getting damaged. So the insurance becomes quite a big issue. So the custodian who is actually going to hold these, that needs to have a very, very fireproof and very secure kind of a storage facility for that. And we need to get the insurance. Now, here's where the problem starts. So while for a lot of the famous art, we do have transparency in the rate, so the insurance is much easier to do. For coins, notes, and stamps, there's a lack of transparency of prices. Because of that, getting a proper insurable value becomes difficult. That is one of the challenges that needs to be taken care of. But once that challenge is handled, then it is quite easy to kind of lock them up in a proper storage facility, distribute the tokens, and then as the value of the coin, notes, and stamps goes up, people can constantly buy and sell those. Keep putting your questions on the side, and then I'll take them in just a few minutes. Then we have a very interesting asset class which is called as sneakers. So I don't know if any of you have ever done that. Could you give me a yes if maybe any of you have ever bought or sold collectible sneakers? So, one is the normal kind of sneakers that you can buy in the shops. Then there are those collectible or limited edition sneakers, which you can't just buy in a random shop. There are special ways in which you get them. Now, you can of course wear them, but then there are ways to maintain them so that when you go to sell it, you get a better price, or then when you buy it, you just keep it in mint condition. And depending upon the rarity, or depending upon how many were issued in a particular lot, the value can really go up. So there was recently an auction, I think in Sotheby's, where a pair of sneakers went for over £1 million, right? And this happened just five known versions made of that particular sneaker. It was not even a limited edition, it was just a sample made. And later, the series was not released. So only those five samples which were there, those were auctioned, and the prices went absolutely insanely high. So sneakers is another very interesting kind of a asset class that is emerging. Then we have watches. So I'm sure you guys keep hearing about Rolex, Omega, and Patek Philippe, and various other such brands where the prices are constantly going up. So again, depend these brands usually keep their watches very limited edition. So depending upon that, the prices can absolutely skyrocket. Now here again, watches are fairly small and easy to keep. So there's not too much of a cost of custody. Insurance is also not very difficult to get because the first time around the invoices are available, the prices are fairly easy to calculate. And finally, we have the class which is Whisky. We did a separate session on it also. I'm personally working on a project where we are tokenizing whiskey in casks. So whiskey is also called as liquid gold because over time the value really shoots up. So, when we talking about whiskey, the most famous in the world is Scotch whiskey, which is made in Scotland. And as per the law, so there is something called the UK whiskey regulations laws, under which it has to be kept in Scotland for at least 3 years in a wooden cask for it to even be called whiskey. And after that, as we keep it for a longer time, the value actually goes up. So if any of you are whiskey drinkers, you would know that the older the whiskey gets, 3 years, 5 years, 8 years, 10, 12, the more expensive it starts to become. And that's the reason we also call whiskey as liquid gold. Again, in case of whiskey, custody is not a problem because it's usually kept in a warehouse, which is a government bonded warehouse in Scotland itself. So it's under the control of the government and it's a very safe and secure environment. And again, insurance is very easy to get for whiskey. So these are the 7 different kinds of asset classes which I think are really going to pick up and in fact become very tradable, and we see a lot of price transparency coming up in these. Now if you have any specific questions around these, please post them here. And of course, if any of you are working on a project where you are tokenizing any of these luxury assets, do get in touch with us. So I also work for a project called as the hybrid finance blockchain or the hi-fi blockchain. And in that, what we're really looking at is it's a permissioned blockchain. So that's another issue I wanted to you guys about. When we talk about such physical assets or tangible assets being tokenized, it's not really very practical to use a permissionless blockchain. And I'll tell you the reasons. Because when we are talking about tangible assets like luxury assets, we've got to be very careful about the legal implications. So KYC needs to be there, proper anti money laundering needs to be in place, data privacy laws have to be complied with. And because of all this, permissionless blockchains like Ethereum will not be suitable. And that's the reason we highly recommend the use of permissioned blockchains. So that's another very important thing that you need to keep in mind. Sure, I'll just repeat the classes for you once again. So the first one is art. The second is collectible cars. Third is private jets. Fourth is rare coins, notes, and stamps. Fifth is sneakers. Sixth is watches. And seventh is whiskey. So these are the 7 luxury asset classes that we talk about. Now, when we talk about blockchain, everyone says that yes, tokenization of real world assets is the next very big use case for blockchain. And probably the next year or few years would really be focused around this. Now, within real world assets, I'm personally very bullish on luxury assets. The reason being they're high value and they're far easier to tokenize and they actually benefit more from tokenization. Like, let's take an example of something like gold. So gold is very valuable across the world, everybody uses it as a store of value also, but then there are so many commodity exchanges around the world that make it very easy for you to buy futures and options in gold also. So when such kind of commodity exchanges already exist, what value is blockchain really going to add to gold or silver or even agriculture? So when you're talking about things like coffee beans, or we are talking about wheat and rice being tokenized, again for these agricultural commodities or even commodities like oil, we already have a very well developed commodities market system all over the world. So what value is blockchain going to have? Second problem which comes in those kind of assets is that the transaction volumes are very high. Now, honestly, blockchains are not made to handle such a high volume of transactions. So when we talk about things like gold or even agricultural commodities, I would conventional exchanges and conventional technologies are better suited for them. But when we talk about luxury assets, these are very high value, but the volume of transactions is low. So if you take an example of a private jet, we're not going to expect that when we tokenize a jet, we're going to see 1,000 transactions per second. No, probably 10 or 12 people are going to get together to buy one, and then they'll probably sell their token maybe once a year or maybe once a month at most. Because of this high value, low volume nature of luxury assets, I believe they actually stand to gain the most when it comes to tokenization. You're most welcome, Jimmy. Any other questions? Please put them here. Okay, I'll wait for a minute or two. In case there are any other questions, feel free to put them. And if you guys are bullish on any of these assets, or what do you think? Which is like your favorite out of these seven? So we spoke about art, cars, private jets, coins, notes, and stamps, sneakers, watches, and whiskey. Which is the one that you are most bullish on? If you could just put that in the comment, it'll give me a good idea. Otherwise, anyway, I think we ran a kind of a poll on this and to figure out, what are the kind of assets that most people today feel are the best when it comes to tokenization. Also, I would highly recommend that you read uh, the document that Knight Frank publishes regularly. It's called the Wealth Report series, and they have a special edition in that for luxury investments. So the most recent is the quarter two for 2023. So what they do is they also maintain a lot of indexes. So in whiskey also they have the whole bunch of indexes. In fact, around art also they have. So that gives you an idea about how that whole industry is moving. Mir has a question. What are your thoughts on securing these assets on the blockchain? Yeah. So, good question, Mir. So, what we've got to pay attention to firstly is the custody. So, that is step number one. We need to make sure that it is a very highly trusted custodian that's going to physically hold the asset. After that, we want to make sure the storage as well as the insurance is taken care of. Then, when we are issuing the tokens, we must go for permissioned blockchains because in a permission blockchain, we can freeze assets. So suppose the court gives an order that this particular transaction is illegal or there is some kind of a scam, that asset can be locked. That kind of a thing cannot really happen on permissionless blockchain. So that's the reason that level of security we have to follow. Another thing is, by nature, it is much more difficult to carry out a scam in a permission blockchain because what are you going to do? How are you going to take the asset and run? So when it comes to normal Ethereum, Bitcoin kind of blockchains, it is possible for you to quickly go to any exchange around the world, sell, convert that cryptocurrency into fiat and disappear. That is next to impossible to do when it comes to permission blockchains because everything goes through a process and it's not instantaneous. It's actually going to take you about 24 hours to get your money out. And there's a reason for that so that all the legal verifications can be done and nobody can just take the money and run off. So if you keep all these things in mind, I think your assets would be highly secured. Another interesting question from yeah. This is about will the government or central authority support tokenization? Very good question. So I would say yes, they would definitely. So I'll tell you what. Firstly, when we talk about tokenization, it isn't even something that you really need permission for because it's just you're using a particular database technology instead of a conventional technology using blockchain technology. What you have to keep in mind is the asset itself. What regulations does it need to follow? So whichever country you're doing tokenization, let's take an example of real estate. You must be aware of so many platforms that are fractionalizing real estate. But in real estate, there are different rules around agricultural real estate or agricultural land, commercial, residential, luxury. In India, for example, different states also have different laws. That is where the challenge really comes, not so much in the token part, but in the actual core asset. Like, for example, country may say that someone from another country cannot buy land in this country. You can't really then tokenize and sell to someone else. Other than that, governments are definitely very positive, and that's the reason we see so many such use cases which are flourishing. Like if you look at USDC, which has tokenized the dollar, again, it's an asset, right? A real world asset which has been tokenized. And they're doing billions of dollars of transactions without any problem whatsoever from the American government. So definitely, governments do support tokenization. Nilesh has an interesting question. The previous question was Vishnu. Now this question is luxury watches which looked at investment. Sure. So luxury watches again, a lot of people are definitely nowadays beginning to buy it. Especially a lots of cricket players. We keep hearing about them buying very expensive watches. So more and more people are getting to know about it and the fact that they want to actually collect them. Now personally, I don't really wear watches, so I don't like that asset class much. But yes, it's very popular with a lot of people. The only thing is that many times the buyers of watches prefer to hold on to it themselves because they want to wear it also. So watches is that kind of an asset class which people don't want to just keep, they want to wear. That will make tokenization difficult because then how do you guarantee it's not going to get damaged? and it won't really be with the custodian. It's going to be with individuals who own it. So that is kind of one of the challenges when it comes to tokenizing the watches. However, if they are the very old museum kind of quality watches, then definitely the museum could act as a custodian. In fact, I feel this is a very good revenue model and an opportunity for museums around the world to actually become custodians, under which not only do they continue to hold their asset, they are also generating so much more money, and they're getting the entire money for the asset upfront. So, for example, the museum which holds the Mona Lisa continues to hold the Mona Lisa, but even gets $1 billion in return, which could be utilized to further grow the museum so much. So, any of you who are well connected in museums, maybe you should go and pitch this concept to them about tokenizing the various kinds of holdings that they have. Hi, John, you're from, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, from Singapore. Welcome. If you have a question, do put it here. Anything else you guys would like to know about and talk about? I'm going to be talking more about luxury assets over the next few weeks because I mean, I believe that that particular group of assets can be used for so many things. I mean, not just as an investment opportunity, but also as a store of value. And then maybe we would see some of these tokens being used as a medium of exchange. Now, let's take an example where you have fiat backed stable coins. You could also end up having say art backed stable coins, or you could end up having whiskey backed stable coins, where at the end of the day there is this kind of a tangible asset somewhere, and you are using tokens backed by that tangible asset as a medium of exchange. So I'm personally very, very bullish on the luxury asset market. So if any of you are working in that direction, just get in touch with me from one of my platforms and let's take a discussion and take that ahead. If there are no other questions, then I think we'll close the session for today. Just wait for a minute or so. If there are questions, just put this. Otherwise, I'll see you guys soon. Okay, then. It was great speaking to all of you. I'll see you next Friday at the same time. Bye bye.